UTSU debate. It's 11:35, and we have VP Equity candidates with us today. And yeah, just to introduce ourselves again, my name is Ajita, the Managing Editor Internal at the Varsity.
I'm Matthew, Graduate Bureau Chief at the Varsity.
Yeah, and before we get to the questions, I just want to remind candidates that we have to adhere to community standards. So specifically, no part of your campaign or your speech here should be hateful, bigoted, slanderous. You know the drill, but yeah. So to start off, our first question is, how would you consistently make the time and space to communicate with different equity-seeking groups on campus and be aware of the unique issues they face? And to start off, we will give it, sorry. You can introduce yourselves for this question first and then answer the question, okay. But yeah, here you go.
Hi everyone, my name is Hela Maroof. I am a third year here and I study English and philosophy. I have also had the pleasure of serving as your EA Equity for the past 9 months, although I'm currently on leave.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Hidar Meglani, and I'm a second year in political science, economics, and statistics. I really hope that I'm able to disseminate as much information as possible through this campaign.
All right, great. And I will repeat the question again, just so that you remember it. But the question is, how would you consistently make the time and space to communicate with different equity-seeking groups on campus and be aware of the unique issues that they face?
Thank you. So in regards to equity, I believe that there are as many ways of addressing the problem as there are different students with different circumstances of socioeconomic and cultural factors that contribute to this. So how I would go about it is specifically to speak with member groups, associations, and unions in order to learn from their lived experiences, because I in no way claim to know everything about everything that everyone individually goes through. But if I get to speak to groups, then I can learn about their priorities and what they hope to see their elected representatives do. And of course, I can do this by reaching out to them in my position, and as well by being present at actual events that those groups conduct and showing face, right? And so I think it's really important to bridge that gap between what members are doing and what the UTSU is doing, because they are already doing so much good work. Like, I'm not associated with any of these clubs, but PAIRS, Regenesis, the Food Coalition. Being able to lend them my resources is how I can support them, because I don't want to be redundant and do something that they have already done. I can learn from them. Thank you.
All right, I think the biggest issue that we've had in the past with issues escalating to the extent that they do in the form of perhaps discrimination, violence, etc., has been because we haven't been proactive enough in communicating with different representatives from different community groups. In order to do that, I would hold office hours, drop-in sessions, informal chats where students can voice their concerns. My biggest concern with the UTSU is that we do not have a rapid iteration process wherein we are not conducting enough data-driven sessions to collect data from students about what issues they're facing to be able to solve those issues. So to do that, I would form a public safety advisory committee, such has also been done at Columbia University, which has enhanced transparency and also allowed the community to become a much more safe place for students. So I would include representatives across communities and encourage transparencies through bi-weekly meetings, surveys that are distributed among students wherein they can voice their concerns. Moreover, if this public safety advisory committee has representatives from different communities, people will feel more comfortable talking about their issues because they might see a representative that looks like them or faces an issue that is similar to what they're facing. Thank you.
The mic.
Oh, you guys can hold on to it.
You can hold on to it for now.
Our next question for the two of you is, sometimes individual equity-seeking groups on campus see their interests as in conflict with one another. How will you manage those conflicts? And I'll ask you to start first, Hunar.
I'm sorry, would you mind repeating the question?
Of course. Sometimes individual equity-seeking groups on campus see their interests as in conflict with each other. How will you manage those conflicts?
I think this...
Sorry, Jill, sorry to interrupt, but you have 2 minutes to speak.
Oh, that's perfect. All right, so I think this brings back my point of forming a public safety advisory committee. Why are these conflicts existing? What are these differences and points that we are facing? What is the core issue that we are facing? In order to do that, I would conduct, once again, data-driven sessions where I'm collecting that information from various student groups and from people within the community itself. This would allow for me to understand the issue better and therefore lend my resources in the most effective manner possible.
Okay, I think that's a fantastic question. And of course, because of the nature of equity, there's a lot of sort of differing experiences that are going to define what certain people believe and would like to see happen. And I think the best way to go about this is to stick to the goal of equity in the first place when I am trying to delegate which, because if they conflict, and my role is to affirm what is equal and just, then I can't simply just pick not taking a position, right? Because equity is about making sure that everybody has a safe university experience without feeling that they are subject to prejudice and subject to discrimination. And though I totally see the benefits of data, equity is also I think, in my opinion, a best communicated interpersonally, because these are feelings of being marginalized, of being neglected, right? And so I would love to be able to advocate for students on an institutional level and on an interpersonal level, and as well on a municipal level if they feel that there are concerns that I can address in that way. But I would have to keep in mind the general motto of the union, especially when it comes to equity, which is that my job is to make sure that you guys have a safe and accessible university experience. And so if I have to choose between two conflicting things, I am going to choose whatever I feel is more just. And the way that I will learn what is more just is by speaking to students, is by learning what students feel is more just, and then directing my energy where the student body needs it, rather than making these decisions completely myself. Thank you.
Thank you. And your third question is, as a member of an equity-seeking group, how do you use your lived experiences to inform your work as VP Equity? We can start with you.
Yeah, so as you can see, I'm racialized, and I am also a woman, and I'm also a queer woman. And so throughout my life, I have felt in a lot of spaces, including this post-secondary institution, that I was not the one type of person that they were looking for. I felt like there was a very specific type of person that was being sought out for at U of T for opportunities, right? And I didn't feel welcome. And the way that I've implemented that into my ethos as a person who seeks equity on campus is that I can use those feelings of powerlessness and channel them into power, into actionable steps where I can communicate, whether it's an email or a meeting or a panel. There are very real things that come out of those spaces because I get to direct my energy and refocus my pain for my communities, and my solidarity gets to manifest in all of these actions that I can actually take, instead of just, sort of wallowing in it, which is easy to do. And with this perspective, I can see and understand the pain, really, that comes with feeling like you are not welcome because of something that you can't control. And so I think it allows me the sort of the communicative capacity to listen and actively learn from students, to be a person myself who was subject to racialization, feminization, and all of these social phenomena that drive us crazy. Thank you.
All right, I think as a person with a disability and being neurodivergent, I have come from experiences wherein it has been very difficult for me to integrate socially in a community setting. I felt very isolated, especially in my first year, wherein I wasn't able to connect with people as easily as I saw some of my other peers doing, and that's kind of what inspires my platform, wherein I want to inspire social events that truly integrate people with disabilities and accessibilities into society. This could be done through disseminating resources better. I mean, I didn't even know accessibility services existed. It took me 2 whole semesters to be able to register with accessibility services, and therefore I would be able to help people that require those resources understand those resources better through my platform. I also want to create a peer disability system. I think that if we have accessibility note takers, it's also possible to pair students with disabilities up with students that do not have disabilities. That also, once again, helps the whole social integration process. There's also been data that has proven that accessibility sports can help students with accessibilities integrate better into society, as well as keep up their mental and physical well-being. These sports can include bocce, wheelchair basketball, and so on and so forth. Moreover, academic accessibility for students with service animals can be so very helpful for students with accessibilities, would be another thing that I would encourage from my personal experiences.
Thank you. At this next stage of the debate, we're just going to move into a period in which if either of you have a question for the other, you may pose it. So if Hunar, if you have a question for Hala, this is your time to pose it to her.
That's okay. I can go ahead and ask you a question. So you mentioned that you would like to make sure that resources are better disseminated. I would like to know where you think that these resources are currently lacking, what specific resources you would like to disseminate, and how you would go about doing that, specifically for students with accessibility needs.
Thank you so much for that question. All right, so when I talk about disseminating resources better, I'm coming from a very specific personal space. When it comes to, I've already been doing that through my campaigning process as well, wherein I'm talking about mental health resources on campus that people do not know exist. I mean, do people know that U of T students actually have access to psychiatry appointments within 4 weeks, whereas in the state of Ontario, you have to wait up to a year to get a psychiatry appointment for the first time? Moreover, the insurance plan that we as students pay for cover up to $100 for 15 sessions of therapy with a registered social worker and a registered psychologist. These are the kind of resources that I would like to talk about. Moreover, there are so many communities for students that have been sexually assaulted, people with PTSD, communities that I personally have been part of that people do not know exist even. For people to know more about these issues, I would talk about it on my social media. I would host events wherein I'm talking about these issues on a panel, perhaps, wherein we have multiple representatives coming from different backgrounds that have also been in different communities of that sort, sort of talking about it, starting conversation, because awareness is the first step to transformation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for answering my question. Do you have a question for me?
Yeah, I actually had a question about what you would like to do for communities that are being marginalized and racialized. I know you talked about that a little bit because you personally come from that background. What would you like to see better, and what could you do in your capacity as VP Equity if you were elected to help people that have been racialized the way that you have?
Thank you so much for that question, and I think it is a really good question because I would like to refrain from virtue signaling and give you actionable steps and programs that I can actually do. And so I think this is also a good time to mention my experience because I have been involved in the past in organizing and carrying out events that focus on discussing colonialism and as well as Indigenous rights issues. And the specific program I would like to expand is Expression Against Oppression, which is a program that already exists at the student union at a lower capacity than I would like to see, but it has already been expanded in the past year. And so these include events where students can come into these safe, welcoming spaces and have productive, real conversations about what it means to be, for example, a Black student on campus, what it means to be a Latin American student on campus, what it means to be an Arab student on campus, getting all of these groups together in solidarity. Not, if I'm having a panel about, what it's like to be an Arab student, I don't just want to see Arab students there. I want to see students of all different types come together and learn about the lived experiences of different groups, because that is the way that we can truly build community. And beyond just panels, because sitting there and listening to people talk is not all that interesting. I want there to be workshops that teach students specific skills to deal with, the anxiety that comes, for example, from being afraid of being met with anti-Islamophobia or gender-based violence or whatever it may be on campus. And I would like to encourage a general culture on campus of intervention when we see these cases happen, instead of just a culture of bystanderism. And the way that I can implement that is by having intervention workshops, whether that is for gender-based violence, whether that is for any sort of other equity-related violence that we see on campus, and maybe even potentially integrating those into orientation week so that incoming students also have the skills that they need to deal with, what it's like to be in a multicultural space where a lot of people have different opinions that sometimes, infringe on just your right to be. So, thank you.
We do want to take audience questions. In the case that there are no audience questions, I'll allow you to ask a question, maybe. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to ask a question? Go ahead. Could we quickly give a mic? Thank you.
Yeah, so I have a question regarding the UTSU in general, but obviously this applies to equity as well. And how will you guys navigate the limited resources of the UTSU and avoid making promises that are outside of your jurisdiction? For instance, I've seen candidates advocate for housing and creating free transit passes for students, which are things that are obviously amazing and I would love to have as a student, but they're not actionable, measurable objectives that could actually be achieved within a reasonable time frame. And I understand building a platform for future change may be a very important thing to do right now, but we also have to understand what the UTSU can do at the moment and is capable of implementing for the future. So how will you guys navigate those promises and make sure that they are actually measurable and objective?
Yeah, just to say, you have a minute to respond.
Okay,
Thanks.
right. So as far as limited resources go, that is such a good question because I have myself seen that on people's Instagram platforms wherein they're promising things that are beyond the UTSU's capabilities and beyond their individual capacities as people as well. In order to prevent that from happening, I have already read up on all the job descriptions and every single thing that I can do in my capacity as VP Equity. Everything that I talk about on my platform is well informed by the bylaws and by UTSU instated resources that they have made available in the nomination packages to us.
Thank you. So as a result of my experience, I would consider myself an expert in the inner workings of the union. And I also am very familiar with how to navigate bureaucracy. And so when I am in a position where I hope to advocate for students to make meaningful change, I can obviously use this knowledge to make sure that the goals that I'm pursuing are not beyond the scope of the union. And things that are beyond the scope of the union are anything that aim to influence private entities. Like the university, we can talk to them, sure, but we can't provoke them into giving us free dorms, right? And if we want action in regards to residents, then I think the better way to go about that would be to have infrastructure to help students to find residents, safe residents, residents where they're not getting taken advantage of by landlords. And the way that we can do this is to expand existing services like downtown legal services or chess or have teach-ins, and again, implemented to O Week. A lot of people are living on their own for the first time. So I'm not going to promise that I can give you a free dorm, but what I can promise is that I will try my best to give you the resources you need to navigate housing in Toronto. So, yeah, thank you.
All right, do we have any remaining audience questions? Because if not, we will move to closing statements, which you can take about a minute and a half to respond to. No one else? All right. Let's start with Tala. Sorry? No, unfortunately not. Sorry.
Okay, so I wanted to thank you for listening to me today, and I want to take this time to repeat my platform and what I'm running on, as well as emphasize to you my readiness to take on this role. So my platform, one of the first and most important tenets to me personally is campus safety, and this consists to me about being proactive in regards to gender-based violence on campus, as well as ensuring that students have access to safe transportation, especially at nighttime. And so gender-based violence on campus ranges from, microaggressions like anti-choice protests that happen at Queen's Park or the Club Fair, or actually institutional violence like U of T's policy on sexual violence, which is grossly uninformed and calls, people who accuse others of sexual violence as complainants. This is not a trauma-informed policy. And as well, I would specifically like to have sessions where I can train students to intervene when they see sexual violence occur in any way. And I'm specifically concerned with the red zone, the week between O Week and Halloween. A lot of students are vulnerable at that time. My second tenet is food equity. I've been working on this for months, and I'm so excited to keep working on it. 1/4 of the households in Toronto struggle with food insecurity. We have 40,000 plus students. Our students struggle with food insecurity, period. And so if I am able to use my role and leverage my role, okay, one last thing I'll emphasize is that I am so confident in creating projects and completing them. I know how to plan and execute. Thank you for your time, and thank you for listening to me.
I would like to take the time for my closing statement to establish my credentials as well as reiterate my platform. As far as establishing my credentials goes, I have done this for 4 years. I am the assistant program director at Launchx, and I have also worked as an admissions officer for them. My entire job involves increasing equity for students and making sure that student concerns do not escalate to the level wherein they are making angry Reddit posts about how horrible the program is, which tends to happen with U of T as well to a great extent. In all sorts of levels. So to prevent that, I would make sure that, once again, I form an advisory committee that includes representatives across communities and hold bi-weekly meetings wherein these representatives meet and discuss grievances that are collected through surveys that are sent out to students. It is impossible to solve concerns without knowing what those concerns are. I would also establish a rapid iteration system wherein I don't just implement policies that I feel like are good or just, but are well informed by the student community. I would also like to disseminate resources better through my social media platforms, as well as through the social media platforms instated by UTSU. I would also like to encourage peer disability systems, social sensory events like movie nights, etc., and accessible sports, which I really believe can help students with disabilities to a great extent. I also want to improve on academic accessibility for students with service animals, and therefore introduce conversations about these topics. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, can we get a round of applause? Well, thank you both for your responses today. This was just a wonderful debate. I hope the audience, you all will stick around, because in just a few minutes we'll have the student life debate. So we'll take a quick break, and thank you again to the candidates. everyone. Welcome back to the UTSU debates. This will be our student life debate for the position of Vice President. My name is Matthew Molinaro. I am the Graduate Bureau Chief at the Varsity.
I am Ajita Vidyanathan, the Managing Editor Internal at the Varsity.
So today we're going to be asking a few questions of you, Han. But I just want to begin just with a sense of the rules and also just some of the procedures. So first, just before we begin, I just want to remind you to adhere to community standards. So no part of any campaign or your responses shall be hateful, bigoted, slanderous, defamatory, libelous, and so on. And just for a sense of the rules, we will ask you a couple of questions today and then allot 2 minutes for response. We'll give you a sign for 10 seconds. But before we do the first question, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Is it on? Oh, perfect. My name is Juan Diego Areza, and I am a fourth year global health student here at U of T, and I'm also minoring in critical equity studies and immunology. So I'm in the life sciences as well as the social sciences, and that's always exciting. For the past 2 years, I've been a CRS here at the UTSU, which stands for Community Resource Specialist, which means that I work at the front desk and I answer all your emails, but it also means that I get to work on special projects, like I've run the food bank for an entire year, and right now I'm helping to work towards CHESS, which stands for Community Housing and Employment Support Services, and through this, we provide legal services to students. On top of this, I'm also the president of the Organization of Latin American Students, which I'm really passionate about because I am Latin American, and one of the main things that I want to do as VPSL is bring cultural identity to the UTSU. I feel like for the past 2 years, or for the past couple of years, there's kind of been a lack in that, and I want to ensure that our cultural identity clubs and our students from different backgrounds feel welcome, not only in the UTSU, but in the U of T as a whole.
Thank you. So we're just going to get started with the first question. What changes do you plan to make to the current clubs funding model, if any?
Yeah, thank you so much for your question. So there's definitely a couple things that I want to do. I feel like there is sort of a lack of transparency in the club funding system, where students will apply for funding and then never hear back, and then just not really know what's going on. As VPSL, I want to ensure that when students apply for funding, they receive direct communication from the VPSL, and if for some reason they don't receive funding, they receive some sort of email or some sort of form of communication that tells them why they did not receive funding and what they can do to improve their chances of getting funding, so that then when they apply next year, they have a greater chance. I also feel like there is some equity concerns with the club funding kind of process, because it's not very clear, at least from my perspective, being the president of OLAS, why some clubs get funding over others. One thing that I would like to implement is a more initiative-based funding, where if you have a project that is focused towards some sort of student equity need or student issue, and you need funding for that, you can apply to the club funding at the UTSU, kind of explain what your initiative is, and from there we can provide funding so we know where our funding is going to. So those are essentially the things that I would do. I would increase transparency, and I would add initiative-based funding to the UTSU.
Thank you. And for your second question, which events or projects from this past year have been worth the cost? Oh, there's a little bit of feedback. Let me ask that again. Which events or projects from this past year have been worth the cost, do you think? And which might you cut?
That's a really good question. So I think in the past year, and I will just be very honest, there hasn't been a lot of VB Student Life events, so it's kind of hard to answer your question directly. But maybe in the past, I really have enjoyed the U of T rideshare program. I think it's really a really good resource for students when they're going out, being able to have that so that they can get home safely. I think that's something that I want to keep pushing, even though it's not directly under the VPSL portfolio anymore, it's under the presidential portfolio, but it's still something that I would advocate for, and I think it's a good thing. In terms of something that maybe I would cut, I think all of the VPSL kind of events make sense, in my opinion. They all have a role to play. However, in the name of trying to increase cultural diversity on campus, I feel like either adjusting or removing the Unity Bowl and trying to add more kind of a culture fest or a global village, something to showcase cultural identity, but also kind of maybe provide awards to students, I think would be better. And I think that it really falls under what I want to do. And yeah, that's basically it.
Thank you. Our next question for you. As Vice President of Student Life, you're responsible for making sure students have a wide variety of well-resourced clubs to choose from. How would you go about making sure first and second year students are connected to clubs and community on campus?
Can you please repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. As Vice President of Student Life, you're responsible for making sure students have a wide variety of well-resourced clubs to choose from. How would you go about making sure that first and second year students are connected to clubs and community on campus?
Thank you so much for your question. That's really good. I want to talk about maybe one part of my platform, which is recognition. I feel like the UTSU doesn't help a lot in terms of like helping to promote like club events and club initiatives. So one thing that I want to do is utilize the My UTSU website and maybe create a portal where you can essentially share your initiatives, and clubs can go on and share any projects that they're currently working on or they have worked on and they want to receive some sort of recognition for it. I feel like we really do live in like a digital age nowadays. A flyer can only go so far. So utilizing this online platform more and disseminating it across different, with the help of different student groups to like promote this website, I feel like it would be a great way to reach our second and third year and even first year students and allow them to find out about not only UTSU events that are happening, but other student events that are happening on campus.
All right, thank you. And those are your 3 questions. Now we'll be taking questions from the audience if anyone has any questions. Or from also on the live stream, you may be able to comment your questions on the Instagram Live at the UTSU's account or on the Varsity's YouTube live stream as well. Yeah.
What's something that you want to first push if you do get the position?
Thank you for that question. So I think one thing that has been on my mind, not only thinking about being a part of the UTSU executive, but just being a student, is orientation. And that's a 1/3 or one giant chunk of what this role is all about. I think for me, it is quite a beast of an event. It happens all in a day. I swear we're the only university that has orientation on one day. I think one thing that I would really think hard about and want to implement is extending orientation or adding more events throughout orientation or Frosh Week so that, number one, there's more opportunity for student clubs to be a part of orientation and students to be a part of orientation. Speaking from experience, I am a commuter, and during my first year, I didn't get to go to orientation at all. So, and even second year. So I think making more opportunities for students and student clubs to be a part of orientation by extending it, that's something that I want to push for. And also, I want to try and bring more cultural identity to orientation specifically. And finally, I want to use UTSU funds to ensure that orientation is accessible and safe. Accessible as in fully accessible. And last year it was 100% accessible, but I feel like there were still issues in terms of like accessible routes. When you go to the orientation space, there's only so many places where you can come in and out. Ensuring and using funds to ensure that we have enough kind of accessible routes and exits, because it's so hot and it's so hectic and maybe students need to get out immediately, I think that would be a priority for me. And also, I want to ensure that enough student groups get to be a part of orientation. So using funds to make more spots for students to be in orientation and also showcase their clubs.
All right, thank you. Great answer. Does anyone else have any questions?
Okay, seeing none, we'll move to the closing statement. So I'd like to invite you to deliver a closing statement of about a minute and a half.
So having worked directly in the UTSU as a CRS really gives me a face-to-face kind of look into the issues that students and clubs face every year. I've been doing this for 2 years. I literally talk to clubs and I literally talk to students. I want to bring this front-facing role into my role as VPSL and ensure that students feel supported and at home here at the UTSU and at the U of T. Additionally, I really do know the importance of having cultural competence on campus. I'm Latin American. We're one of the smallest minorities here on campus. I swear I'm the only Latin American student in my class most of the time, or a lot of the time. So I want to gear events towards making sure that students feel like they are studying at a place where they want to be celebrated and they're celebrated, and that people want them to be here. So if you vote for me, I will, and I'm just going to go through my main points. I want to increase cultural representation at the UTSU. I want to make orientation more memorable and exciting. And I also want to recognize the work that student clubs have done on campus. And finally, I want to prioritize creating more fun events for the UTSU. You have my word, and I promise to maintain my front-facing role so that our executive can stay connected to their students and that we can have a really good year. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Juan, for participating in our debate. Best of luck on the campaign. And yeah, we have about 10 minutes to go until the presidential candidate debate. So please stay in the room. The presidential candidates will be here soon. And for those on the live stream also, stay tuned in. Thank you so much.
expert music. Music to business. Business to music.
All right, it is 12:30 p.m. and that means it's the last debate, the presidential candidate debate for UTSU 2025-2026. We have both of our presidential candidates here, and yeah, just to introduce myself again, my name is Ajita Vidyanandan. I'm the managing editor internal at the Varsity.
I'm Matthew Molinaro. I'm graduate bureau chief, also at the Varsity.
Yeah, and just to remind you, please stick to community standards, which means no part of your campaign or your responses here should be hateful, bigoted, slanderous, so on and so forth. Let's be nice. And yeah, I'm going to give you guys the mic right now to introduce yourselves, and then the format of the debate will be that we'll be asking you 3 general questions, 2 personalized questions, and then you'll have time to ask a question to each other and have each other respond. We'll get questions from the audience, and then we'll have closing statements, all of which will be 2 minutes each. But yeah, does that sound good? All right, great. We'll start with you, Paul.
Great. Hello, everybody. My name is Paul Guan, and I am running to be your UTSU president. Now, the reason why I'm running is because over the years, I have been in student government, advocating already for us, and I've been in that student governance, and I've learned firsthand what works and what doesn't work. So I'm here to make sure that I could deliver all the methods that work in student governance. Because oftentimes, problem is, many candidates might overpromise and underdeliver, and that's betrayal of trust. I am not like that. I want to make sure that I promise realistic things. I want to make sure that my promises are not in vain and that I can make sure to keep these promises. As a third-year political science student, I'm also the current president at Wordsworth College Students Association. And I already represent 13.9% of UTSU membership. Am I out of time? No, okay, I'm good. Okay, I see, I'm good. See, at UTSU, we need a leader that knows how to deliver results, real results. I am here to do just that. Vote Paul Guan for the president of UTSU. That means you're voting for student advocacy, that means you're voting for integrity, and that means you're voting for accountability. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. Oh, that's really loud. My name is Melanie Vevechka. I'm a third year. I study political science and anthropology, and I'm thrilled for the opportunity to be running as your next UTSU president. A little bit about me. I've been involved in student communities for the past 2 years. My first year was very hectic, and my journey in university has been anything but linear. And I really love being active in my communities. I love learning from people, hearing their stories, and the unique perspectives that they contribute to shaping our campus and even Toronto itself. I'm a researcher, I'm a student representative, an editor, and I'm also a youth advisor for a Canadian senator. But beyond titles, I want to take what I've learned and make sure that students at U of T feel heard, valued, and supported in their journey. That's why I'm here, and that's the type of leadership that I strive to bring for the UTSU.
All right, and we'll get into the questions now. Once again, I'm reminding you that you have 2 minutes to respond to each. At about 10 seconds before it ends, I'll flash you a little wave, and then you'll know. But yeah, first question. In the past, the UTSU has been criticized for the response to contentious social issues. What do you think the UTSU's role should be in responding to these issues? We can start with Paul.
I think this is a question that I would like to quote the bylaws of the UTSU in order to answer most accurately. In the bylaws of the UTSU, it says that I am here to represent all 41,000 U of T undergrad students. And quite frankly, I strive for inclusivity. I don't necessarily want to prioritize a particular side, a particular group of students. However, this doesn't mean that I'm going to tolerate hate on campus or that I'm going to tolerate division on campus. My job as the UTSU president, the sole spokesperson of the organization, is to make sure that all the UTSU members feel safe, all the UTSU members feel like they belong here. Because, tell you what, you guys all belong here just as much as any other U of T student. So to circle back to the original question of how am I going to personally deal with these social issues, I'm going to focus on student well-being. I'm going to focus on mental health. I will make sure that nobody feels left behind and that nobody feels excluded. That's my answer.
Could you please repeat the question? Thank you.
Sure. In the past, the UTSU has been criticized for the response to contentious social issues. What do you think the UTSU's role should be in responding to these issues?
The UTSU is a student organization, so we need to respect and we need to represent the students. That means that we have to listen to whatever social issue is going on and to do it justice. But that also means that we have to have respectful discourse and ensure that everyone's perspectives and voices are being equally heard. So I do think that the UTSU does have a perspective to represent everybody and to foster respectful conversation. However, I do think that it is also our responsibility to remain neutral as well in order to be inclusive for everybody.
Thank you. Our next question for the two of you is, how much do you plan to enter conflict with the university? Will you work more within the university structure or confront it with the outside, from the outside? And Melanie, we'll start with you.
Oh, with me? I think that at the end of the day, we are a student organization, so we have to have a healthy mix of both internal and external. We have to have, we have to hold people that are accountable. Well, we have to hold people accountable that are in higher academic governance, but also we have to keep our students involved and always listen to what they want to say. We then have to have discussions within the internal team at the UTSU and decide how we can better represent these concerns and how we can do justice before we move forward to higher governance. So I do think that a healthy mix is the best way to go.
Thank you. Paul?
Just to reiterate, the question was about how I will deal as UTSU president with university officials or even government officials. Was that the question?
Within conflict.
Within conflict?
Yeah.
Oh, if that's a conflict arises? So this is actually a really fun topic for me because right now, as the president of Wordsworth College Students Association, I have to attend the provost meetings where undergraduate student leaders go and advocate for their respective student bodies to the provost. And I did have a conflict with the provost, and the conflict was that I was addressing food insecurity with the provost. I told them, hey, at Wordsworth College Students Association, we only have a limited number of funds, so we cannot scale up our existing initiatives. What the provost told me as a solution or an answer was ridiculous. He said, quote, why don't you just raise student fees? Why don't you take more money from students? And I said, that's not what I asked. That's not feasible. I cannot advocate for student fee increases like that out of the blue if I, for example, don't know what the finance is, if I know there's other methods that we can upscale it. So, yes, I respect university officials. Yes, I respect even higher government officials. But the problem is, I am not here to advocate for these university officials. For me, students are always number one. Students at U of T are always my priority, and I will never advocate for anybody else but us students. So circling back, yes, for conflicts, I'm going to prioritize students in that conversation. I'm not going to prioritize anything else but us students. And that is my answer. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And your final general question is, I'm sure you're familiar with each other's campaign. It's up and running on Instagram. Go check it out. And I want to ask, what is one aspect of another candidate's campaign, of the other candidate's campaign, that you would like to critique? Paul, you can go ahead.
The question, to reiterate, was what would I critique about Melanie's campaign? And quite frankly speaking, I think Melanie's campaign is great. I think she has really great vision. I believe she has many excellent things that she promises to do. However, the only difference that I might add is the fact that UTSU president is pretty much the biggest student government position at U of T St. George. And to be a president of an organization that you're supposed to be representing 41,000 people and leading an executive team and the entire association, that requires experience. And one thing that I can critique is just the fact that she might not have the presidential experience. She can learn, absolutely, but she doesn't have that student government presidential experience, leading an association, leading the executive team, uniting the executive team to make sure the entire organization does what they are supposed to do, which is giving back and advocating for U of T students. But apart from that, I think what she stands for is excellence. She stands for mental health. She stands for student well-being. She stands for advocacy. She stands for transparency. I think apart from that, everything is excellent. So yeah, that is my not so critique of Melanie's campaign.
Oh, it's okay. I got my own mic. Thank you, Paul. Those were very kind words about my campaign. And it is a very valid question to have what my experiences are. I feel like I haven't touched base on it as much as I probably should have. I do want to reiterate by saying that I don't think that a great leader is measured by how many experiences it has. But a little bit about me. I mentioned that I'm a researcher. I do research for the government of Kosovo. I don't just coordinate projects there. I work on policy that affects thousands of people. I research, draft, and analyze real-world political decisions. Like I navigate government bureaucracy with officials to push forward initiatives that actually have a tangible change. And that's not just engagement, it's execution. I've also read research on indigenous law, on climate change, and constitutional law, and I worked across multiple organizations to advocate for that change. I do think that leadership isn't just about pushing forward, it's about knowing how to listen and how to create space for others. So I've learned through my experiences on campus as well as an executive assistant, as an editor, as a mentor for some other people, how to bring people together and ensure that every voice is valued and fostered in an environment where collaboration leads to meaningful outcomes. Look, this also will go back, sorry.
No, you can go ahead.
Okay, this will go back to my question for you, but last, engagement is great, but students, they need somebody who can also listen to them and truly listen to them. They need someone who knows how to advocate, how to negotiate, and fight for policies, and I do have experience in those things. Thank you. Oh, should I ask my question?
Yeah.
Okay. Alrighty, so in your campaign, you talk about events and you talk about engagement as well. You also briefly mention on mental health. However, you don't have any policies. So my question for you is, what are your actual tangible policies? Thank you.
I think that's a very valid question to ask. Thanks for that question. I could talk about it now. Now, one of my priorities as the president of Wordsworth College Students Association was student engagement. I wanted to make sure that students know what the student association is and come to these events and have fun because, quite frankly, again, you pay student fees. You pay your incidental fees in your tuition. So my goal is so that as many students as possible, they get their money's worth. So just tying back to the whole student engagement, events, mental health initiatives, what I'm gonna do, what I've focused on in my previous experiences is I've hosted exam de-stressor events and I've upscaled them so that they would be bigger than before and that students would be able to come during very busy exam period. It's coming up soon, I know, I hate it. So during very busy exam season, I allow pet therapy to happen. I organized events where you sit down and take a break, maybe get some bubble tea, maybe get some pizza. And these are the type of events that I want to push for during hard times because I know how hard it is to be a student. Why? Because I'm also a student too. So I have firsthand knowledge of how hard it is to be a student. So for actionable items, yes, I want to do the events that I've already done before countless times, like pet therapy and exam de-stressor events, to really cater to that mental health, really help students during hard times. That's my question, that's my answer. Thank you so much.
Thank you for those answers. And now we can move on to the personalized questions. We'll alternate between the two of you, and we can start with Melanie. in your varsity interview, you had mentioned improving communication and establishing bi-weekly office hours with students to learn about issues that they want the union to address. How will you ensure you deliver on what students are asking for?
That's a really good question. I think that the first thing to say is how important transparency is. And you can never really do any change unless you really hear what people are saying in the student body. To deliver the promises that I'm making through this campaign and to be sure on respecting what people say, I think that the main thing that you need to do is to really listen and then see if there is a pattern. If there is a pattern, that means that there is a broader systemic problem. And that can be very much easily fixed when we have resources and when we have people that want to fix it within. Other than that, I think that a lot of people are not quite sure what is happening with the UTSU. They don't really know where the money is going. There's no transparency with that either. And they don't even know their rights or what services we offer. So I think that sometimes the answer would just lie to direct them to the things that we already offer. Because I also do think that U of T does not lack engagement, but it rather lacks a sense of direction within the student body. But yeah.
All right, thank you.
Our next question for you, Paul. In your interview with the varsity, you spoke about, if elected, ensuring all your executives keep their campaign promises. How would you go about doing so, especially if you disagree or find a promise impractical?
And I really appreciate that question. So to address that question, one thing I have to know is that with the elected people, by the way, amazing people running for the vice president positions, please look into it. But from the elected people, my job isn't to force what I believe. My job isn't to do that as the president. As the president and the chief executive officer of the executive team, my job is to, one, unify that executive team so that we can all strive for the same goal together. What is it? Advocating for students, giving back for students. And two, well, first thing I'll probably would do with them is sit down and go over what they want to do, what their promises were, and how they think they could actionably achieve it. And what I implemented, for example, at Wordsworth College Students Association, is executive timelines. And what this means is month by month. For example, back in like May, the executives would write down from May, June, July, all the way on to their last month, which is April, to know exactly what they want to accomplish, what they want to finish in that said given month. And when we do this in the first day in office together, sitting together, writing down the executive timelines, if, let's just say, things happen, right? Somebody doesn't do what they promised to do, maybe in July, for example, then we can hold them accountable. We can then use this executive timeline as a bar, very clear bar of measurement and scale to hold executive members accountable for their promises. So to tie back to the original question, which is what exactly I'm going to do to hold them accountable, I will probably implement the executive timelines, and I would have a talk with them.
Thank you. Melanie, your next question. Your main campaign goals include creating a system for students to get involved in clubs, a subsidy program for commuter students within the TTC, and introducing a retroactive credit, no credit option. And these plans seem ambitious given a one-year term. How will you prioritize all of these goals, and how do you plan to implement these initiatives by the end of your term?
Great question. First of all, it's very cliche to say that I've always been very busy and I love being busy, but I'm really passionate about these initiatives and I know that we can make this happen. Firstly, how we would implement them. I want to break it down to just be a little more structured. For the credit, no credit, we get data. We have to collect data, whether this be petitions, surveys, and testimonials, and show that there is a demand. Major universities don't make any major promises and many policy changes without showing that there is actual need. Then we take it to the upper people, like the upper governance, and this includes conversations with Dean Wooden or Dean Yip or even President Gertler himself, because we can push for a lot of stuff if we show that there is a lot of demand. Secondly, for the TTC subsidy, that would include a percentage-based model. The first requirement would be that you have financial need. And other than that, it would be something holistic where we would assess how far away you live from school, how are you able-bodied to make a walkable commute to school, and how many times a week do you have to come here. So that would be a percentage-based model, and for the club matchmaking system, it's actually a very simple algorithm. You can make this with ML reprogramming, where you just get all the clubs in the at U of T, not just the UTSU, to tell you descriptions about what they do and what their work is for and what they advocate for, and then we can filter it based on key data points, like keywords. And then people can just filter through that. It's really not that hard to program if you have the right tools. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Paul, final question. In your interview with the varsity, you criticized transparency at this year's annual general meeting, UTSU's annual general meeting, and a lack of engaging student events, but you didn't go into many details about any key campus issues that you would like to fix. What issues would you like to focus on, and how would you go about meeting students' needs?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for pointing that out. And one of my passions is, like I mentioned before, inclusivity. I want everybody on campus to feel included and feel safe. This means I want to make sure that there is no broken student facilities. Right now, for example, at Wordsworth College, there's construction going on right now. And the construction has blocked off the wheelchair accessible ramp. That's the only accessible ramp in the building that lets you go into the building. And that irritates me because I know that there's students who use wheelchairs who cannot get into the buildings because the ramp is inaccessible right now because there's construction. So I don't just listen, I don't just point these out. What I do with these is I bring back and take actionable steps by raising it to the dean, for example, raising to university official, asking them this needs to be fixed now. So yes, for accessibility, that's a big time. I care about it. And another thing is it student engagement, you said?
You mentioned a lack of engaging student events from the UTSU.
Yeah, and I think a big part of that is because, quite frankly, UTSU is not doing enough events at Wordsworth College or even any other college student union in general. You could see events happening ever so frequently with the fraction of the budget as well. UTSU has millions of dollars that they could spend and do events and initiatives. And I'm going to push for more of those because I think that more fun events, engaging events, whether it be a semi-formal that does happen, or whether it be a fall semi-formal, right? Students are going to want to come and have a good time at these events. And by extension, they want to learn more about UTSU, why maybe one should join UTSU. And yeah, that will bring more attention to the UTSU.
Thank you. Those were the personalized questions. Great job answering them. And now this is the time where you get to levy concerns, comments, criticisms, questions against each other's responses so far to the questions. You can ask maybe up to 2 questions for the other candidate, and you will get a response time of 1.5 minutes. Does that sound good? Which one of you would like to start?
Well, I think I just want to, I think not just me, but the U of T students in general, I think it's very valid to ask for clarification on certain topics. So, for example, I just wanted to ask, as a voter, I want to ask how you plan to lead the executive team and the entire association as the spokesperson of the UTSU, considering the fact that you have to advocate for 41,000 students.
I feel like I did make it clear to some extent that I do prioritize hearing from students themselves and hearing their real testimonials. But internally, we have a common ground here. I do think that we should keep people accountable as well, and we should have a clear plan. However, I don't think that this is anything revolutionary or new, and I think that the UTSU has already been doing this. Furthermore, regular meetings within the team and within also the varsity, that ensures that more people are heard. Everyone knows their responsibilities. Everyone knows what's happening. And so I'm a lead editor, for example, and this is just for students that I want to focus on. When I lead editors, what I've found to be most powerful and most, like something that really works, is to really listen and get to know them first. And that's something that I would do with the team as well, internally at the UTSU. So I know how they function, I know what their needs are, and I know how we can respond together and how we can work together. But yeah, that was my answer.
Thank you. And now, Melania, you could also ask something to Paul.
All right. Do you genuinely believe that the way to foster a community at U of T is by throwing more events that most students will not be attending? And I do want to preface in this little segment that I do have some time, that the UTSU throws an event almost every week, and every college does throw their own events as well. So keep in mind, most students are not coming to these events. What we lack is not, and if there are events that we do lack, which I do agree, they exist in a vacuum. They're not this broad thing that you need to dedicate for a whole year to just make more and spend more money. Because the money can be allocated to things that are more important, frankly. So, do you really think that we need more events? Do you think that we could maybe have engagements in another way? Because I do think that we don't lack engagement in the sense of events, but we lack it more in the sense that of a belonging. There's not a belonging with the students at U of T. Like, we don't feel that. So how would you do that?
Thank you so much for the question. I think that's an excellent question. And in terms of engagement, I think a really good way to measure the student engagement in general is voter turnout, for example. The UTSU in general gets a voter turnout of just above 10% every single election. And in recent times, the biggest election ever was back in 2018, discussing the UPass, for example. And that had a voter turnout of nearly 25% student. And that goes to show that if there's important issues at the UTSU, students are going to engage themselves in order to make sure that their voices and their choices are heard. So, while correct, just by throwing random events, that is not going to just magically increase student engagement. What I mean by I will push for more events is pushing for events that students will genuinely want to come. Pushing for events that are generally popular. Ski Trip, for example, is a very popular event that happens just around Reading Week period, which a lot of colleges do and a lot of associations do. And they generally have incredible turnout. Hundreds of people sign up for it. And what we can do is we can offer them discounted tickets, right? So that students want to come to these events. Another thing that we could probably do is false formal. Thank you. That's good work. So yes, student engagement has to do with engaging events where students care about coming to these UTSU related stuff.
Thank you for that answer. And I just want to, before we move to audience questions, if either of you have another question for one another, now would be the time to voice it.
Right. Okay, I do actually want to talk a little bit more about events. You keep bringing this up, but would, like, for example, the ski trip, how would we finance this? We could do the money for student initiatives that actually, students need and require. Would this come out of the pockets of students? Would we increase tuition? Another thing is, keep in mind, the president position is a yearly thing that you are getting paid for, that if you do like a calculation, it's almost $40,000 a year, and you don't really have any policy platforms. All you're doing is wanting $40,000 a year to be a pretty expensive event planner and a babysitter for the internal team of the UTSU. Do you actually have something that you see that students could probably benefit from that goes beyond events? Like a policy that actually would make them proud to be at U of T?
And thank you for pointing that out. I think one thing that I really focus on is accessibility. I care about facilities, and my job is to make sure that you walk into any building and don't see that out of order sign on student facilities. For example, as a really fun story, back in my first year, I went into one of the Wordsworth College buildings. There was a water fountain that did not work. And I asked the student leaders at the time, hey, this water fountain is not working. And this is the only available water source in the entire building for students. Anything happening with that? The answer they gave me, oh, it's under construction. I said, you know what? Fine. Second year, I asked the same question to the president at the time. And the answer I got, oh, we don't know anymore. I thought it was under construction. So I thought, I raised the concern as a student, and the answer I got was, I don't know what's happening. I know that it's a problem, but I didn't advocate for the student. That's what the answer I got. And comes third year, where I finally become the president of Wordsworth College Students Association. First thing I did when I met with the dean is bring this problem up. Hey, did you know that this water fountain, the only available water access in the entire building, was broken? Answer I got, nobody ever told me. That shocked me, because 3 years I talked about this, and she's never even heard of it from the student leaders. And after I mention it, what happens? Within 1 week, it gets fixed. Crystal clear, new water fountain, ice cold. Love it. And that's the kind of stuff that I want to do for U of T students. Yes, you're right. I am not here to be a money monger who just spends money at the UTSU, spends money for events. I'm here so that students at U of T get their facilities fixed, they get their accessibility accommodations met, and that they don't have any problems obstructing their studies. That's what I want to do, and that's my answer.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Would you have a question for Melanie before we? Okay, perfect. So we'll just now open the floor to anyone, if there are any audience questions. Also the same thing for anyone streaming right now. If you have a question, please type in. But did anyone in the audience have a question? I can pass this.
There goes a microphone.
So I just wanted to talk about hard decisions. The president's job at the UTSU isn't always to tell other people what to do. That's often VP PUA's job. It's not just to run events. It's not just to decide on transit policy. It's a lot of things, and one of those is to make sure that hard decisions get made and that they get made right. I want to use Melanie's platform as an example of a hard decision that might come up. Your transit policy effectively boils down to a redistributive policy, and whether or not you agree with whether or not it's a good policy doesn't change that fact. It's a redistributive policy, and that means that some money will go from some people and it will go to other people. Unless you want to take away from existing programs or you find efficiencies, that could necessitate an increase in fees. So my question isn't what would you do in that exact case, but rather how would you make these decisions that are hard, that are, I'm going to make one group of people unhappy by doing this and benefit another?
All right. So that's actually a really good question. I do think, should I, okay. Oh, all right, okay, sorry. Oh yeah, back to your question. So the UTSU does have a budget, right? And that budget is not always used. I would not increase any student fees, and I will operate for the TTC subsidy. I have made it clear that this is for people on financial need, And I do also want to make it clear that this would never be 100% because that's not feasible financially. The max that it could go would be 50% for people who live far away and are on grants, and that is a very small population of students. Everything else could be quite feasible because we will still have the money. If you see the records from other years from the UTSU, they did not spend the entire allocated budget that they had. I would not make any cuts from the clubs that are already existing. I don't think that's fair. And although I'm all for equality, in this one particular stance with the TTC thing, because it could be hot topic, it is equity that is more important. But yeah, I would not cut any clubs, and I would not underservice anyone. If somebody had a concern, I would be more than happy to address that and to make sure that we're all on the same page. Do you have a follow-up?
And so for hard decisions, especially, well, let's just stay on topic with the TTC, right? Everybody, it's been a conversation. You passed TTC subsidy. That's been a really big conversation, so let's talk about that. Now, for those hard decisions, I understand that some student groups will be upset. Some students will be happy, right? So what I'm gonna do, well, what I have to do as president is sit down with the said student groups and hear out, well, what exactly are you mad about, or what exactly are you happy about, so that if there's anything that, as the president of UTSU, the nature of the job allows me to do, to take any actionable steps to maybe compromise in the middle, maybe actually get stuff done. Because the UPass, while it is popular, it was incredibly unpopular when the idea was given with the consequence that we'll have to pay 322.50 cents a session. And students really didn't like that idea, so it didn't work. However, well, let's just say there's people who like the idea. My job isn't to, favoritize one side, but at the same time, you're right, I have to make tough decisions like this. And how am I gonna make it? I'm going to talk about it. I want to communicate with these said student groups. I want to communicate with the executive team. And again, I want the board to have their thoughts on this, because the role of the executive position is to execute the jobs, execute the orders. So what we have to do is, one, talk with the said student groups, two, bring it up in the executive team, and three, bring it up in the board meeting as a motion within the UTSU board. And then finally, after we go through those incredible scrutiny of student opinions, then I'll make a decision. And that's what I'm gonna do. That's why I'm gonna be very responsible and accountable. And that is my answer to your question, Eli.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
A question from one of our viewers on Instagram. This is from Hadia. The position of president requires a servant leadership mindset. What does servant leadership look like to the candidates?
Sorry, did you say servant leadership?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Do you want to go ahead? Okay, I can start because you just talked. I think that it is very important to realize that this is a paid position and this is your job. So you have to listen to the people that have elected you and the people that are paying for are essentially financing your wage. And I think that service leadership, the base of it, the minimal thing that you have to do is to be transparent and to talk to the people that have put you in that office. So for me, that would be just, one of my focal points in my campaign is the open doors policy. So please talk to me, please let me know what's happening, tell me what your problems are, because I am elected here in order to serve you and to make you feel heard and supported.
I think that a president's job, sure, in servant leadership where you serve the students, correct. But I'm not going to sit here and wait for students to raise problems. I'm not going to sit here and wait until a problem happens to solve it. My job, another point, is to prevent these problems from happening, whether that may be, again, tying back to the accessibility thing, whether it may be broken facilities. I want to get it fixed before there's major problems arising. Or right now, a big problem is food insecurity. These residence dining halls, for the same price, give you less food. That's a problem. And my job is to tackle those problems as soon as possible, maybe even before it gets brought up by a student. Yes. And on top of this, as the UTSU president, you would sign a contract that lists your checklist of to-dos and your responsibilities. So the leadership, again, a part of my campaign is accountability. That contract can be used as a measure for accountability. So that is my answer to that question.
Thank you. I saw him.
Both of you have talked a lot today about events, and in my mind, this is an area where the UTSU has historically overpromised and underdelivered, especially when you look at big, complex things like the orientation parade. That's, people talk about it every year, and it never seems to happen. My question for you is, what will you do to cut through the red tape that has historically plagued the UTSU, to solve those problems, to get things done, and to make good on your promises that you've both made to hold each other accountable?
So to reiterate the question, was the question about how are we going to hold each other accountable? Oops. I think, something's happening, never mind. For me at least, right? The biggest thing, again, yes, it's about events, yes, it's about initiatives, but most importantly, you're right, it's accountability. Because I can promise the world, I could promise the moon, but I could not deliver that. So my promise is so that I make realistic promises that can be done. And by the way, these promises aren't some long-term promises that you are going to see in a year's time, whether it be 3 years, whether it be after you graduate. I want to keep a healthy balance of you receiving the benefits now as students, as well as focusing on these long-term plans that's going to be sustainable for the association, that's going to benefit the students in the future. And that is my answer to the question.
All right. My answer to the question would be that I want to reiterate and say that I'm not making any promises that I know that I could not fulfill. Everything that I have promised and everything that is focal in my platform is something that I have well thought out, and I have a plan with it. I have design plans, I've researched into this, and I know that this can happen. If your question was specifically for orientation and you want to know about what I think about orientation, I could also answer that. Would you like me to? Well, I think that the best thing to do is talk to the internal team, talk to the external student body, and find a compromise and find a way that we can all do something that's realistic. So, yeah.
Are there any other questions? There was a stream. Yeah.
This question is from Ella Mack, again on the live stream. Woodsworth Student Government does not have any budgets, audits, or meeting minutes available to students online. As the president, Paul, do you think that level of accountability is acceptable?
That is very excellent that you point that out. Actually, the reason why we do not have any of the meeting documents available online is because, well, previously we actually did have it, but the problem is lately we just had a problem with the domain and the website that we're actually just going under construction to quickly fix the website. So yes, we do have all the board meeting minutes, all the executive meeting minutes, and etc., all generally uploaded there, but just right now on the website, we just had a domain problem and we have to fix the website. So yes, you did catch me in the wrong time, but if you had looked maybe a couple months earlier, prior to the winter break, you would have seen it.
Are there any other questions? Okay, at this juncture, I'd like to invite the two of you to proceed with closing statements. So we have a minute and a half just to summarize and give kind of some final words to our audience and also to our viewers. Paul, if you'd like to begin.
As closing remarks, I just want everybody to realize and really listen that voting Paul Guan to be the president of UTSU means that you're voting for accountability, that you're voting for student wellness, that you're voting for delivering results and real, measurable results. Not just saying, hey, I did this, but I'm talking measurable results that can be put on a scale. At UTSU, we need a president who knows how a student government is led, who knows how student government should be led, and who knows what to do and not to do as a student leader. Being already advocating for 13.9% of the students at U of T, the UTSU membership, I want to extend this, and I want 100% of the UTSU membership to be advocated by me so that there's finally accountability, integrity, and kept promises. Vote Paul Guan for president of UTSU. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Paul. Melanie?
I hope that today I've shown you why I would be the right choice to be the next UTSU president. My goal isn't just to lead, it's to make sure that every student at U of T is heard and supported and represented in a way that actually matters for them. If you're still unsure about me, I encourage you to look at my platform. I'm on Instagram, or even just stop me on campus or talk to me and ask me any questions, because at the end of the day, this isn't about just my campaign. It's about all of us and what we can achieve together. I also want to reiterate that my plans are achievable. I have talked to multiple people about this as well, including software designers who could support the club matchmaking system. And this might be an odd closing statement to say. However, Paul, you've been the president of Woodsworth for 6 months, and there haven't been any tangible policies or anything that you've done for Woodsworth other than events. And that seems like that is the same energy that you want to bring to the UTSU. And I really hope that if you want something more and if you want to advocate for something more, you think about your vote twice. Thank you for your time, and I hope that I can earn your vote.
Thank you. And let's give our candidates a nice round of applause. So with that, that marks the conclusion of our debates today. Thank you all for coming. Please, just a reminder to go out and vote, look back at candidate profiles. Thank you very much.